It was a warm Sunday afternoon in London, and 12-year-old Alan was at the park with his friends. They played tag near a shaded patch where parents lounged on benches, chatting and keeping an eye on the kids. Alan, with his quick laugh and boundless energy, was easy to spot as he darted through the grass, his Nike trainers leaving faint trails behind him. He was wearing his favorite Liverpool jersey, a bright red that practically glowed in the sunlight. But before we dive into what happens next, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from today? Drop a comment below. Meanwhile, Sergeant Benson, a long-serving officer with the local precinct, was patrolling the park with his canine, Titan, a German shepherd with a bite known to criminals across the borough. Benson was known among his colleagues for his brusque demeanor and no-nonsense approach to policing. He rarely showed softness and had earned a reputation for taking swift action, sometimes without asking too many questions. From a distance, Benson noticed a group of kids playing by the park's boundary near a new playground, laughter punctuating the air. However, he saw one of them, Alan, appear to break away, heading for a bush. Benson's gaze narrowed. A series of robberies in nearby neighborhoods had involved young suspects, and the sight of a boy moving away from the group triggered his suspicion. Without pause, Benson called out, "You there, stop!" His voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet chatter of the park. Alan turned, a puzzled look on his face, and hesitated, not understanding why a police officer was shouting at him. "Did you hear me? Stop right there!" Benson repeated, his tone more commanding. Alan froze, his heart pounding. He knew to respect authority, and he'd been taught that the police were there to protect people. But the intensity in Benson's eyes was alarming, and Titan, who was now at Benson's side, was growling softly, his gaze locked onto Alan. "What's going on?" Alan asked, his voice wavering. Benson's response was immediate. "Stop moving and get on the ground!" he barked, reaching for Titan's leash, ready to release him. The other parents and kids stopped what they were doing, tension spreading through the park. A few adults stepped forward, unsure if they should intervene, but wary of the uniformed authority before them. Alan, unsure and scared, looked around for help, hoping his father would see him soon. As luck would have it, Alan's father, Captain Richard Green, was just arriving at the park. He had spent years as a respected police captain in London, handling some of the city's toughest cases, and was well known for his fairness and dedication. He was heading toward the playground, planning to surprise Alan with his favorite post-game snack, when he heard the unmistakable sound of a police command. Turning his head, he froze, heart pounding at the sight of his son being confronted by another officer, Titan growling, poised to strike. Captain Green immediately assessed the situation and called out, "Sergeant Benson, stand down, that's my son!" Benson, momentarily thrown off, didn't release Titan. His hand gripped the leash even tighter. "Your son? Sir, he was acting suspiciously," he replied, not easing up, his tone brimming with defensiveness. Captain Green's voice was firm and unwavering. "You didn't assess the situation, Benson. I know Alan and I know he's done nothing wrong. I suggest you leash your dog." Benson, still tense, seemed hesitant but finally relented, reining Titan back. "Sir, with respect, I saw the boy leave the group and head into the bushes. We've had incidents with young suspects, and I was taking necessary precautions." Green walked over to Alan, placing a protective arm around his shoulders, feeling his son's small frame trembling slightly. "Necessary precautions? Alan was just playing," he said, his eyes hard. "Your immediate response was to order a child to the ground and threaten him with a dog. How is that justified?" Benson swallowed, realizing the growing crowd around them was watching with bated breath, murmuring among themselves. He looked around, his confidence beginning to falter. "Captain, I didn't mean any harm, it was instinct." "Instinct, Benson?" Green's voice had dropped, steely and controlled. "Is this the instinct we teach our officers? To profile based on suspicion alone, even if the suspect is a 12-year-old boy?" Alan, still clutching his father, found his voice. "I didn't do anything wrong, Dad. He just started yelling and I got scared." Green felt a swell of anger but kept his voice calm. "Sergeant Benson, you're supposed to de-escalate situations, not exacerbate them. Imagine if Alan didn't have me here, or if he were another boy without a parent in law enforcement. Benson's face flushed. He could sense the gravity of his mistake weighing heavily. "Captain Green, I apologize," he stammered. "I was just doing my duty." Green took a deep breath, glancing at Titan, who seemed far more controlled than his handler. "It's about more than duty, Benson. This isn't just a failure in judgment. It's a failure in trust. And it's a failure to protect every child in this city as if they were your own." A representative from the precinct arrived shortly after, responding to the incident that had quickly spread on social media. They listened to Captain Green's detailed account, along with testimonies from onlookers. Within hours, the precinct launched an internal investigation into Benson's actions. Days later, Benson was placed on temporary suspension pending further review. The news rippled through the force, casting a spotlight on the way officers approached young people, especially those of color. In the aftermath, Captain Green was invited to speak at a citywide police forum, emphasizing the importance of community engagement and responsible policing practices. Alan watched his father from the audience that day, seeing him as more than just a parent, but as a protector of justice for all. He listened as his father spoke passionately about trust, courage, and the true meaning of public service. Following the forum, Captain Green became a respected figure not only in his precinct, but across London's law enforcement community. His speech had left an indelible impact, sparking conversations on training, bias, and accountability in police practices. The media coverage made him a citywide figure, and he was quickly appointed to head a task force focused on police reform, aimed at building trust between officers and the communities they served. Meanwhile, Alan's life changed in quieter but significant ways. The ordeal had made him wary of authority figures, and it took him some time to feel comfortable even walking past an officer in the street. His friends noticed he'd become more reserved and cautious, no longer leading their games at the park. Captain Green, aware of his son's growing apprehension, began having gentle, late-night conversations with him. "Alan," he'd say, sitting on the edge of his bed, "I know what happened at the park was frightening. But remember, not all officers are like that. There are many who care about protecting you, just like I do." Alan would nod, but his answers were often clipped. "I know, Dad. It's just, I thought the police were supposed to keep us safe, but now I'm not so sure." Green could see the hurt in his son's eyes, a kind of innocence lost. Determined to restore his faith, Green organized for Alan and his friends to visit the police station, where they could meet officers in a positive, controlled environment. The event was aimed at rebuilding trust, but it also served a larger purpose, one that had begun to take shape since the park incident. When Alan and his friends arrived at the station, they were greeted by a group of officers, kind, approachable, and enthusiastic. They explained their roles, answered questions, and even showed the kids how different parts of the station operated. Captain Green led the tour, careful to ensure Alan saw officers from diverse backgrounds and specialties. To Alan's surprise, even Titan was there, though without Benson. Another officer introduced the dog to the kids, showing them how he was trained to obey and protect. Titan seemed calm and almost gentle, allowing Alan to pet him, his tail wagging slightly. The moment was profound for Alan, who had feared the dog since that day in the park. Finally, Captain Green sat Alan and his friends down for a talk, explaining the importance of police accountability and integrity. He didn't shy away from discussing how officers sometimes made mistakes and how it was up to the force and the community to hold them accountable. As for Benson, the disciplinary review concluded with a mandate. He would undergo extensive retraining and participate in a community outreach program. It was part punishment, part rehabilitation, and Benson, though resistant at first, accepted it as a chance to reevaluate his approach. He realized the gravity of his actions and the harm he'd caused not only to Alan, but to his own profession. One afternoon, as Benson walked into the community center for his outreach work, he spotted Captain Green. Green approached, his expression unreadable but his tone professional. "Benson," he said, nodding, "you have an opportunity here. It's not just about repairing a mistake. It's about understanding what it means to serve." Benson nodded, genuinely humbled. "Thank you, Captain. I know I have a long way to go, but I want to make it right." Over the next few months, Benson's journey became one of redemption. He immersed himself in training that challenged his perspectives, working closely with communities he had previously misunderstood. He learned how to assess situations with care, how to de-escalate with respect, and how to earn trust rather than command it. It was not an easy road, but he committed himself fully. Eventually, a year after the incident, Benson requested a meeting with Captain Green and Allen. Green hesitated, but he believed in second chances and wanted to set an example for his son. In a quiet, private room at the police station, Benson sat across from Allen and his father. His expression was earnest, and he looked at Allen with genuine remorse. "Allen," he began, his voice steady but soft. "I'm sorry. I was wrong that day. I saw something that wasn't there because of my own biases, and I acted without thinking. I can't undo what happened, but I want you to know that I'm working to be a better officer and a better person." Allen, now 13 and a bit taller, nodded. The fear had mostly faded, replaced by a quiet understanding that people could change. "Thank you," he said simply. It was all he needed to say. Captain Green, watching the exchange, felt a surge of pride for both his son and Benson. It wasn't just a moment of apology, it was a moment of healing and hope, a step toward building a police force that served with empathy, accountability, and genuine care. As they left the station, Allen looked up at his father. "Do you think he'll really change, Dad?" Green placed a hand on his shoulder. "I believe he's trying, Allen. And sometimes that's the best start anyone can have. Change takes time, but we all have a role to play in it." And as they walked out of the station into the late afternoon sun, Allen knew that while the past couldn't be erased, the future was theirs to shape. A future where justice, fairness, and empathy were the guiding principles for everyone in blue. Leave a comment if you enjoyed this story. It doesn't cost you anything, and you'll make me very happy. Thank you, and I look forward to your like.